This is Elvis Online, and I'm Joe Crine. I have W.S. Fluke Holland with me here today. Fluke, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. We're kind of sitting here waiting for the big snow to come.
Oh goodness, yeah, I'm in New York. I don't care for snow myself.
Well, I don't either, but I think we're going to get a little bit. But I'm fine, doing great.
Good. Fluke, can you tell me where you were born and raised?
I can. I was born in a little town down on the Tennessee River called Saltillo. And when I tell people that, most of the time I spell it for them. Saltillo. Saltillo, Tennessee.
Okay. So, what did you want to do when you grew up?
That's a question that I talk to a lot of people about that. A lot of young people, and I tell them that I don't think that a young kid, say 10, 12, 13, even a teenager, I don't think they actually know what they might have an idea what they want to do, but they don't know because you can't tell what's going to happen. In my case, when I was 10 years old, my dad passed away, and my mom, that was in 1945, and my mom met a guy from Bemis, Tennessee, a couple of years later, and they got married, and then I moved to Bemis. Now, I was going to be a mechanic. I like cars, and I had a job all my high school summer vacations at an air conditioning place and keeping trucks running. So I never thought about being in the music business all of my years of coming up. It never crossed my mind. It just happened that things happen that you have no idea what's going to happen. So about that same time that I was moving to Bemis, Carl Perkins and the Perkins family was moving from another little town 50 miles north. And that's where I met Carl and his brothers, and that's how I got in the music business. So I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. It all just happened. I think that's one reason that most people call it a fluke.
Okay, so now I might as well ask now, how did you get the nickname Fluke?
Well, there's one thing that a lot of people think is because the way I got into music business, I'd never played, never thought about playing. I was at a place where Carl and his brothers were playing one Saturday night, and he said, "We got an appointment with Sam Phillips Thursday, borrow some drums and go with us." I said, "Man, what would I do with a drum?" But for some reason, I did. I borrowed some drums the next day. We got in my car Thursday, went to Memphis, and got a recording contract that day. The first song we did was a song called Movie Mag. Now, that was kind of a fluke deal. Then in 1960, when I was going to retire, Joyce and me decided to get married, and I was going to retire from the music business. I figured I'd done all I would ever do. Played on the Blue Suede Shoes, big hit, played on the $1 Million Quartet session. That's a big Broadway play now, and been in a movie, and it seemed like it was pretty well over at Sun Records, and we'd spent all of our money. Now, just as I was going to retire, I got a call from Johnny Cash. He wanted me to go with him for 2 weeks. Now, I met John in 1955, and we toured around over the country in different places with package shows, we called them back then, with Carl and Elvis and John, Jerry Lee, Roy Orbison, Billy Riley, Sonny Burgess, and all the guys. So I went those 2 weeks with him, and that 2 weeks lasted almost 40 years. Now, that's another thing that people say, well, that was a fluke. So, but another one is, I was hanging around a little service station next door when I was a kid, next door to where we lived, and I I thought it sounded smart. Instead of saying, what is that thing or what is that doing, I'd say, what is that Fluke? Let me see that. So the boy that run the service station, he named me Fluke. He said, here comes Fluke. So there's so many versions of it. They all sound good, and they're all true. So it's a weird thing. I was 2 days ago looking at a magazine that Marty Stewart had done years ago, and had a picture on the front of it, and the headlines on the article was W.S. Holland, the first Fluke drummer of rockabilly. So the word fluke went out all over the world with me. That's the reason on my website, when Ron set it up, he said, hey, we got to put Fluke in there so people know where you are. So that's the reason the website is wsflukeholland.com.
There you go. Well, let me ask you, Fluke, who were your early musical influences?
Well, now, that's another weird question because I didn't have any. See, I wasn't even thinking music at all. It never crossed my mind. When I got out of high school, I went to work permanent with this air conditioning company. I was going to be an air conditioner technician. It never crossed my mind. Now, what I did do for some reason, and I don't know till this day, but when I met Carl and his two brothers, Clayton and J.B., they played some of the little clubs around here, and I would go to some of the clubs because I had met Carl's younger brother, Clayton. We were big buddies. Now, but I still never thought anything about music. I was just going to be with them and have a big time. And for some reason, though, when they'd be playing an up-tempo song, Carl did mostly then Hank Williams songs and an old song, Hey Good Looking. A little bit, hey, good looking, a little bit up-tempo. Yeah. I don't know why I would do this, but I'd walk up beside a Clayton and keep time on where the curvature of that upright bass is, sound a little bit like a drum, but I still never thought about playing or anything. And that night when Carl asked me to borrow some drums and go, I told him, I said, well, man, I never thought about playing drums. But I did go, and I went out to my mom's house and set the drums down and put the hi-hat on the right because that's the hand you play the hi-hat with. I never had seen a drum set, didn't know how to set up a drum set. So, and at that time, none of the small bands had drums. See, the Grand Ole Opry didn't allow drums. Country music didn't have drums, and the rock and roll music hadn't been invented yet. Nobody had thought of a name for some of the up-tempo music that was being made. So I didn't. There wasn't anybody that I knew or heard of, and that's another thing that's a really a weird deal about it. That's the reason that I tell the guys now, hey, the main thing, being good is not the main thing, but it's good to be good, but do something a little different. So in my case, I didn't have to worry about doing anything different because whatever I did at that time on drums would have been different because it wasn't any drummers hardly.
Right, I understand, yeah. I understand. Now, on December the 4th, 1956, why were you at, I mean, we all know that was the $1 Million Quartet Day. Just so for the listeners, why were you there?
Well, let me ask you a question. Have you seen the play?
Yes, I have seen the play, and I was going to ask you about
it. Okay. Well, here's what happened.
Okay.
Here's how it all happened. Now, in 56, see what happened, Elvis and Scotty and Bill recorded in the middle of the year in 54. The end of the year in 54, Carl and his two brothers and me went over and made the first record. Now, we went back. The Blue Suede Shoes was our third record. Now, what happened in 55, here come the rest of the Sun group, like Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison, Jerry Lee Lewis, like I said, Bud Deckerman, Sonny Burgess, Billy Riley, the whole group. Now, when that happened, Sam Phillips and Bob Neal, who was a disc jockey there, formed a little company booking all of the Sun artists on shows together. And that's where we all met and played together. I just got a couple of days ago, if you hadn't got one, somebody said it to me, and they got it off the computer some way, a poster that was John and Elvis and Carl at Amory, Mississippi in, I think it's March in 1956. The ticket prices was $1.25.
Oh, boy.
So we all toured together around. Now, back to the $1 Million Quartet. We being Carl, his brothers, and me, were back in Memphis on December the 4th, 56, to record the release after Blue Suede Shoes, because Blue Suede Shoes had come a real big hit. So we was recording the song after that. Now, the reason Jerry Lee was there, Sam hired him to play piano. He wasn't a big star then. He was a piano player hanging around, and that was great. So in the middle of the session, we had no idea they were coming, but John and Elvis just walked in the door. Of course, when they walked in, with the session stopped, hey, how you doing, hello, because, you know, they heard we were going to be in town. So they lived in Memphis, and we live where I do now in Jackson, which is 75 miles out of Memphis. So they heard we were coming in to do a session. They just dropped by to say hello. Now, when they did drop by, like it happened many times with us, after we went to Columbia Records in Nashville in the 60s, we'd be at a session, somebody would hear about it, like Hank Jr. or maybe Willie or somebody, and it just stopped and people start singing songs for a while. But Elvis sat down at the piano that day. For some reason, Jerry Lee got up, and they just started singing some songs. Nobody thought a lot about it that day. If Jack Clement had done something that was strange, another Fluke thing, it wouldn't have happened. He just turned the machine on, that reel-to-reel tape machine, and let it run. And he went next door to the Taylor Cafe to get him a sandwich. Now, Sam Phillips did think to call a photographer.
Okay.
So he called a photographer, and he made the picture. You've seen it, the famous picture. Mm-hmm. I kidded Sam later. I said, man, if you'd have really been smart, you'd have had that guy to pan over about 3 feet. I would have been in that picture, then it would have been famous. But that's how that all happened. We went ahead and recorded the song Matchbox. It was the next release out. And then later, when the boys started being big stars, then it started to be famous. After Elvis went to RCA wanted to release a record of it. And I remember at one time, they was having a little discussion on, they didn't think John was on it. You've probably heard that.
I was going to ask you about it.
Yeah. They were all singing, and for some reason, I don't know why they wanted to say that. But then, though, what made it really famous, years passed, everybody became a big star, and this friend of mine named John Cassette made a Broadway play out of it, as you know that story. Now, when they made the Broadway play, then it really became famous now. And they do a bang-up job getting guys to to play John and Elvis and Jerry Lee and Carl. I go a lot. I work with this company, Cambria, and we have dealer events in places where they play, and I go to the show. Sometimes I'll sit in and play the song, Matchbox, that we was doing. And it's amazing to me how something that happened that night, we didn't think anything about it, could wind up being as famous as it is. Probably the most famous recording session of all time.
Yeah, what a fluke.
Yeah. And I kid people tell it about, I said, boy, they do a great job. The people getting the talent to do the shows. There's about 3 or 4 groups.
Right.
I just came back from Palm Desert last week with a group out there, and I said that they don't have any problem getting somebody to do Elvis. They don't have any problem getting somebody to do John or Jerry Lee or Carl. The problem they have is to find somebody to play drums that's pretty as I was in 1956.
Hey, let me ask you, Fluke. I was going to ask you this later, but since you brought it up, how close is what's in the play to what actually happened?
You know, it is so close. It is amazing. But I tell you what, the thing that they did change a little bit just made it really exciting. Now, Sam Phillips, the kind of fussing and stuff like that he does in the play, it wasn't hardly that bad, but it was a little of it. And the boys like Carl and Elvis, they didn't ever have a big problem. But for somebody to think to add that little bit of excitement to it, it just made the play happen. For example, I'm asked that a lot, and if I'd have done the play, of course, I wouldn't have thought to add that to it, and it probably wouldn't have been exciting, you know.
Right.
So I think it's great that they did that.
Yeah.
To think about doing that was amazing to me.
I understand. They have to make it interesting to the people watching. They have to make it interesting.
You know what? I went to the opening when it opened in Broadway, and working with Cambria and setting up the events. I've probably been to 8 or 10 of them, and I'm booked now to go January, February, March, and April of next year. And I never get tired seeing it. I believe I could just sit all day, show after show, almost. It's almost like shows that we did. It's like, of course, it's all written out and all rehearsed, but still, it's like you don't know what's going to happen next.
I would certainly go see it again.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
Let me ask you, Fluke, what was Sam like?
Sam was a super nice guy. Sam, and I never have thought, and a lot of people that I was with never did say, Sam actually didn't. Of course, when I say this now, I don't mean to take anything away from Sam, because he had to be a genius, and he was unreal smart, and he knew what he was looking for,
right.
And he was smart enough to know when he heard it. But see, Sam didn't have to go out and find anybody. He didn't have to go out and look for any talent. Everything that happened on Sun, it just walked in the door. See, when Elvis, of course, he walked in the first time to record a record for his mother. See, in the beginning, it was Memphis recording. You could just walk in there and sing a song, and Sam could make the record and hand it to you. Mm-hmm. And that's what Elvis did. Then, when he came, now, of course, when Carl and everybody else heard Elvis, they said, wait, I'm going to go over there. So that's like I must to go over. And then John, all the guys on Sun, they just happened to hear Elvis, Carl, and then whoever next, and they went and met Sam. and I tell you, a fellow that we seemed to leave out of the program that was so important was a disc jockey named Dewey Phillips.
Oh, sure, Red Hot and Blue.
Red Hot and Blue. He was no kin to Sam, but every time Sam would get a record made, he would take it over and get it played. Now that's where everybody heard Elvis. That's where they heard Carl. Then when John, Jerry, the rest of the boys, by Dewey Phillips, probably, if you just wanted to say, hey, there's one fellow that caused more to happen on Sun Records than anybody, it would be Dewey Phillips. If he hadn't have played those records, hadn't had that Red Hot and Blue show, none of that would have ever happened.
Right.
So I've always wanted, I wanted him to get the credit he deserved, because he is the man that made it all happen. And on every one of his shows, he used to say, call Sam,
yes,
and he'd play something. And I tell now when I'm doing a show, and young people will ask me, say, man, what is a good way today to get into the music business? And I say, hey, it's not like it was when I started. In 1955, 6, 7, all you had to do is go into Memphis, it didn't take but 12 minutes to make a hit record. You go in, took 3 minutes to cut it, took Sam a few minutes to run it up to Dewey Phillips, took him 3 minutes to play it. You was a star. You could work the National Guard Armory in Mississippi the Saturday night after that. That's how easy it was back then.
Jeez.
But that's all changed.
Yeah. Now let me ask you something. What was Carl like? Carl Perkins.
Oh, super nice guy.
Was he?
Yeah.
Now you said you toured. You said you toured with him. Can you tell me a funny story about touring with Carl Perkins?
Well, I'll tell you one thing I tell is kind of funny. See, when I had to make the decision in 1955 to be in the music business then, after we had the hit record, or keep working on air conditioners. So, for some reason, I made the decision to stay in the music business. Then after getting out and playing in the band, I figured, hey, playing in the band's cooler than working on air conditioners. But anyway, we toured together until 1960. Everything was great. The reason that I was going to retire, Carl and everybody on Sun Records, at the end of the 50s, it seemed like it was pretty well over at Sun Records. It looked like Sam had made all the money he wanted to make, and he was invested in Holiday Inns. Of course, that's in the play, And Carl, I tell this story, Carl had spent all his money. I spent all of my money on cars and speedboats, and Carl had spent all his money, and I kind of cleaned it up with saying, well, he was thirsty a lot. So, but, and so when I retired, when I went with John, now, Carl came later. I guess you know this. It was about, I can't remember the exact year, but early 60s. We were playing a show down south of Jackson here at a college, and I got Carl to ride down with me. Him and John hadn't seen each other then in a few years. So then I said, we need to get Carl and his brother Clayton to go out with us on some shows. Now, that's how Carl got with the Johnny Cash show.
Right.
See, and then we worked together. He stayed with the show until, I'll say 1975. Yeah. So again, I was touring with Carl. We was together. When Luther died in '68, Carl played guitar for a long time. Then he fronted the show. But back to a funny thing that Carl did, and he was kind of a quiet fellow, but in those days in the '60s, right when he started, a lot of times we'd all 4 or 5 of us be in the same room because nobody had a lot of money to buy a lot of hotel rooms, even though they didn't cost all that much. But we would get a roll-away bed. See, in the hotels back then, I don't know if you still can or not, you got more people than you have beds, they'd send in a roll-away. Now, we would take time out of who slept on the roll-away. And it's kind of funny what I tell them that. It seemed like it never did get Johnny Cash's time to let. But anyway, Carl slept on the roll-away one night. He got up. We woke up the next morning, and he got up, opened the door, folded the roll-away up. When he folded it up, they were on rollers, and you could roll. He rolled it out on the balcony of the hotel. We were just up on the second floor. And he flipped it over the balcony, tried to make it go in a swimming pool, but it didn't hardly go. So he went out and went down the stairs, picked it up, flipped it on in the swimming pool, come back up. He said, well, boy, I just want y'all to know that roll-away is not going to hurt anybody's back ever again. So it's a million little things like that happened back then. And Ron Haney, my partner and guitar player and singer, is finally we're putting a book together.
Oh, good.
And we're going to tell as many of those stories like that as we can remember.
That would be great. Let me ask you, what'd you think of a young Jerry Lee Lewis?
Well, everybody liked Jerry Lee Lewis, and he was kind of he was a little bit of a wild man, but he wasn't hardly as wild and crazy as people begin to think he was years later. But what he was a different, super talented person that nobody had ever seen anybody like him. Nobody had ever heard anybody play like him. It's back to what I said. You got to be different. If being good and really knowing how to be good musicians and knew all about how to play, Sun Records never would have happened in the 50s. It was so different. That was it. And Jerry Lee was just different. Now he would do things like this. Years later, time passed so fast I can't keep up with it, but several years ago, we did the session, we did a session at Sun Records, and it might have been the Class of '55 album.
Great album. Great album.
Well, they'd already closed the station, but the studio, now it's back open recording, but I was walking in the door as Jerry Lee was walking up sidewalk, and you could see his watch real good. I said, man, that's a pretty watch you got on, Jerry. And he just took it off his arm and handed it to me. He was that type of guy. You never knew what he was going to do. But yeah, that studio then was closed, and now it's back. And I've been over 2 or 3 times a year and record with people and have a big time. I did a thing with boys in Norway, and they had a record release, and Ron and me went over and did about a 5 or 6 day tour with them. A lot of people still like Sun Studio.
Sure. But let me ask you something. When was the first time you met Elvis?
Okay. Hey, I'm glad you asked that, because I'm trying to find out where this is. Now, again, somebody got this that I'm going to talk about. It's a video, and somebody got it off the internet, and you can see it. It says the early years of Elvis, and it's like backstage. Elvis is there, John's there, Carl's there, we're all there, and somebody shot a video. I didn't think anybody in 55 had this video, but a fellow sent it to me, and that was in 1955, and the reason they called me is because they was trying to figure out where we was when that was made. Now, I think it was in Oklahoma City, but it could have been a little bit Texas. But that's our first time I met him in 1955. And then, but I was with him a lot of times after that on the shows and just meet him at different places.
What'd you think of Elvis? What'd you think of him?
Well, here is all that we all thought. I know the first time I seen him perform was down at a little town south of here called Bethel Springs, Tennessee, at a high school auditorium. Now, we went down to see him, Carl, his two brothers, and me. And you could, because we didn't know anything about what was going to happen, but you could tell, you just saw somebody that had a look and had an action that you'd never seen before. And, of course, that's when we began to realize that's what it takes, be different. But then I never will forget, we played a show in Amory, Mississippi, the one I was telling you about. And after the show, there was something about Amory, Mississippi that really liked Carl Perkins and his band. And every time we get through the song, it just on and on, just applause, applause, and applause. And I'll never forget, as the show was over, we was all leaving, and Elvis come by, Bob Neal. Of course, he was kidding, but he said, "Bob, don't book me with this Perkins band again." Of course, that made us feel good, especially later, for him to be as big as he was. I don't think we will ever see anybody even come close to topping what Elvis Presley did. Do you?
Oh, I agree. I don't think anybody ever will.
I don't think it will.
Did you ever have a chance? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you ever have a chance to sit down and have one-on-one conversations with him? I mean,
we did. My group of my friends in Jackson here, I went to school with. We was in Memphis one day, just driving around. We stopped at this little restaurant that had benches outside, and Elvis and some of his friends was there, and we stopped and talked for a long time. And now, when I go to Memphis, the road, the street has got stuck that building, and I tell people that's one of the first places I saw Elvis, and you know, he was just, back then nobody knew anybody. It wasn't like anybody was a big star.
Right.
It's just like we was all in the music business and all started. But the last time that I saw him to talk to him was in 1969 or 70. I can't remember the year. But Joyce and my two daughters, Kim and Chris, went on vacation to California, and we went through Las Vegas, and Elvis wasn't playing Las Vegas, but he was Glenn Campbell was performing at the Hilton.
Okay.
And I met Glenn Campbell then, and we went to the show, and sitting down in the audience, just a old just a little ways was Elvis, and that's the first time I saw Priscilla. So I just walked down there and kind of kneeled down behind him, was going to say hello, and here comes some of his security. Then he had to have security. And he said, oh, no, okay, Bart, he's okay. I know him. He said, come on down to the dressing room. I'm going down after the show. So we went down to the dressing room backstage and talked to him for a long time. And that was the last time I actually sat and talked to him in person.
Uh-huh. I want to ask you one more question about the $1 Million Quartet, and you touched on it.
Okay.
You touched on it a little bit. Nobody hears Johnny Cash on the tapes, but Johnny always said that he did sing at the $1 Million Quartet.
Well, I never even thought about him not singing. Say, I mean, they were there, they all sang. And later when somebody wanted to say that he wasn't singing, I never would have thought about even questioning that. But for some reason, somebody did, and I don't know, maybe they think he ought to have been louder, or maybe they think he ought to sing. I don't know if any of them sang anything by themselves or not.
Yeah, they did. But you're saying Johnny was there during the taping?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, of course, there's the picture. You see him in the picture.
Yeah, no, you do. Yeah.
See, now, I'll tell you what else. There was another picture or two made, and there was a girl with Elvis.
Marilyn Evans.
Yeah, and they made a picture. There was another picture made, and you could see her sitting on the end of the piano. Have you ever seen that picture?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay. But now, she didn't perform, she didn't sing, but that's another thing. John Cassette or somebody had the thought to put her in the Broadway play.
Right.
And I think that's another thing that made it really exciting. Yeah. I never would have thought about doing that if I'd have been doing the play. But yeah, I always thought, and I still do think, they were all singing. Now, I never have even, I don't know if somebody got the tapes down and just tried to, run them through some kind of machine to know if they could hear or not hear John. I just always thought, and still do think, all four of the guys sang.
Okay. Let me ask you something. How did the 1957 movie Jamboree come about?
Well, golly, Bill, how it come about, I don't even know if I remember or not.
Okay.
I know if you remember the scene, we was actually in a recording studio, and it was kind of a story of somebody doing some record sessions, and I remember saying, yeah, Carl Perkins and his band is coming in for a session, so-and-so, but far as actually knowing exactly why we did that, you know what, I'm going to find out, so next time somebody asks me, I'll know.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Hey, how did you get the Johnny Cash gig?
What now?
How did you get the Johnny Cash gig? I mean,
okay, that's another fluke thing, I guess.
Okay.
See, John, all those years, he didn't have a drummer. He just had the two boys, right? Marshall and Luther, the two guys. Now, of course, we had toured together a lot. Now, he got one of his biggest engagements up in New York for a week, and then down to Atlantic City for a week at the Steel Pier. And I guess, I know we've talked about that a lot, he just decided that Marshall and Luther couldn't make enough noise in a big building, and he'd heard me play since 1955 there, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and he knew I could make a lot of noise. I just happened to be the guy he called. He could have called whoever. By then, there was some more drummers, you know.
Right.
In the beginning, Elvis didn't have a drummer. DJ joined him later. But by 1960, hell, nearly all the bands had a drummer. They still didn't allow drums on the Grand Ole Opry.
Really?
And I was lucky enough to be the first guy to play a full set of drums on the Grand Ole Opry.
Well, that's cool.
So I messed up a lot of people. But he just happened to call me, and like I say, fact of business, when he called, I said, John, man, I can't go. I said, I've already got me a job lined up with a boy here in Jackson. A boy named Jerry Molan was an engineer with the city of Jackson, and I knew him good. And he said, come to work with me. So I was going to work with him, and I said, John, I got to call him and tell him. And I called Jerry Molan and told him, I said, man, I would like to wait 2 more weeks if you would let me. He said, that's fine. Go on. So I went I called John back and said, I can go with you. So our first show was up there. And then we came down to Atlantic City. We were in the dressing room, and John comes. He said, let's talk about you here. Said, man, we'd played the days up at the club in New York. We'd come down to there. He said, I like what's going here. I like what's happening. I'd like for you to work with me the rest of the time I'm in the business. And I first said, when he said that, now, the words he said, he said, I'd like for you to work with me occasionally. Uh-huh. And I said, John, man, I can't do that. I said, just got married, might have a family, and I'm going to have me a regular job, so I'll have a payday every Friday. So that's what I got to do. He said, when I said occasionally, he said, I just work occasionally. I'm going to try to set like a 10-day tour every month. I'm going to try to work like 100 days a year, and I want you to go with me as long as I'm out in this business. And I remember saying, well, that sounds like a regular job. He said, it'd be as regular as I can make it. I went to the telephone that night and called Joyce. I said, you can call Jerry and tell him I won't be coming to work. I am going to stay in the music business. John has told me to come with him and I'd have a regular job.
Wow. Wow. Hey, Fluke, do you remember the Heartbreak Hotel spoof that Johnny did?
Oh, the Heartbreak Hotel.
Yeah, well, Johnny would go and pretend to be Elvis.
Yeah, when he was doing an Elvis imitation.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the first people that ever did an Elvis imitation. He was doing it back then. And have you seen the video of it?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, what we would do when he'd do the hip thing, and when he get through with it, he comb his hair back. Well, now I don't know if this is on the video somebody made. I didn't even know there was a video. But we carried a pistol with us, an old cap and ball pistol, and we'd fill it full of powder and paper wads and shoot it, and it'd make a lot of smoke. Now, what would happen when John would do that Elvis imitation thing, and he'd take his comb out and comb his hair back, he'd look at the comb and he'd throw the comb.
Okay.
Was that in the video you saw?
No, I don't remember that, no.
Okay, anyway, he'd throw the comb, and Marshall would come out with this bag he kept right at the throat with that old pistol and shoot the comb like it had some lice or something in the comb, and the smoke would go everywhere. We did that on stage for I don't know how many years. But I thought John, now I look at the video somebody made, I thought he did a pretty good imitation of imitating Elvis, didn't you?
I thought he did too. I wonder if Elvis ever saw it.
Now say that again.
I wonder if Elvis ever saw it.
For some reason, I couldn't tell what you said.
I wondered if Elvis ever saw him do that.
Oh yeah, he knew it was happening back then. See, this was happening in I can't remember the exact year. This was happening in the mid '60s for sure, and then on up. Yeah, he knew it was going on. He liked it.
Hey, Fluke. In December 1957 at the Grand Ole Opry, Johnny and Elvis met there. Were you there at that? Do you remember that?
In '57.
Yeah, at the Grand Ole Opry.
I was not there.
You weren't there, no?
No. See, I was still with Carl then.
Okay.
See, I didn't join John until '60.
Okay.
Yeah, I wasn't there that night.
Let me ask you, how did you hear about Elvis's passing?
It's so weird. There's a few people you never forget. I was racing boats back then, and I was in my shop working on a racing motor to go to Somerset, Kentucky for a boat race, and a girl that worked at the newspaper called me, and she said, "I just heard that Elvis had died." Well, I didn't believe it. In fact, she said, what do you got to say about it? I said, look, I don't really want to talk about it right now. It's hard for me to believe that's happened. I didn't even believe that it happened. And of course, I didn't say any more about it, but I found out it did happen. And it was something that I couldn't believe because, knowing I didn't realize that he'd been into the drug thing like he was, because the last time that we worked together or I was around him after he went to the Army, I never was around him all that much except just seeing him 2 or 3 places for 2 or 3 minutes at a time, like the one in Las Vegas and the other place. And I couldn't believe it was true.
Right.
And it's still hard to believe.
It is. Trust me. It
Yeah.
is. What was John and June's reaction about it?
Oh, well, it's like everybody. Everybody's, oh, no, this can't be true.
Right.
Hell, Elvis can't be dead. It's just, everybody pretty well felt the same way about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wanted to tell you something. I saw you and Johnny, the Johnny Cash Show, and at the Saratoga Fair in New York in 1976. And I have to tell you, it's still, and I say it on my radio program all the time, it's to this day still the best concert I have ever seen.
Well, I appreciate that. And we talk about that a lot. The Johnny Cash Show, when the Statler brothers joined it, and then the Carter family, Carl Perkins, and all of us, if somebody didn't like something they saw on the stage, they just didn't need to be going to a show, because Carl would open it with some rock and roll, and then the Statler brothers, and was their style, and the Carter family didn't join. And I was lucky enough to be able to play behind all of them.
See, now Roseanne was even doing her hit at that time when I saw her.
Oh yeah. She came. She started traveling with us when she was a little kid, and it's really strange you mentioned her. I just found the picture that I've been looking for. There's a company now called Tim Forrest Company is doing a documentary about me, starting when I was a little kid. And on up to, and we're looking through pictures to find stuff, and I found a picture of me and Roseanne on a snowmobile in Lake Havasu. No, not Lake Havasu, somewhere in Northern California. And I got to get that picture and show it to her. She probably don't even know it happened. Lake Tahoe is where it was.
Yeah. Hey, if there was one show that you remember, is there one show doing the Johnny Cash while you were with Johnny Cash? Is there one show that you remember the most that just kind of sets in your heart?
Well, there's two really. Of course, there's so many. I mean, I could pick from 100, but playing at the White House for presidents.
Wow.
And the other one is playing Carnegie Hall.
Was it cool?
Yeah. And then the Palladium in London. You think about somebody like me from little old town of Bemis, Tennessee, out here, and never thought about playing music at all. Got in the music business and got to play places like Carnegie Hall, and for the president. That's a couple of three of the ones I think about most. But there is so many that I remember. But those three is probably the highlight of the whole career.
Were you a little nervous playing at San Quentin and the other prisons?
No, we wasn't. I never thought about being nervous, and I never thought about. There was nothing that happened at any of the prisons that created any kind of situation that we was in any kind of danger. Fact of business, those inmates in all those prisons was so nice. It was amazing, and I always said, and I still believe it, that their reaction, the reaction of the inmates, liking what we were doing so good, is one of the reasons that made those shows a big hit.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to think that one of those people sitting in one of the prisons was Merle Haggard.
Merle Haggard? I heard the statement later. He said, when I get out of here, I'm going to do what them boys are doing. And he did it good, didn't he?
Yes, he did. Hey.
And another guy we met there that we, didn't think anything about any kind of danger at all. And he got out and worked with us a long time with Glenn Shirley.
Wow, yeah.
And his son works at a radio station here in Jackson now.
Wow. Hey, what do you think of the everlasting popularity of Elvis Presley?
Again, all I can think to say, and I hadn't heard anybody else say any different or any more. He was just so different, and not only that, he was a good singer too. He could sing good, and I didn't realize that until I heard some of his religious songs later. I describe it as like to do what he's done, to be a human being, you just about got to be perfect. I kind of compare it to a racehorse that wins the Kentucky Derby. That horse has to be perfect. It can't be anything. He's got to have the right look. He's got to have the perfect look. He's got to be pretty. Got to be the prettiest horse in the business. That was what I think of when I talk about Elvis. He happened to be that person that was as near perfect as you can be. He had the right look, and of course I tell this joke sometimes. One of the things that a lot of us guys didn't like about him back then, he was so pretty.
Hey, Fluke, what are you doing now?
Golly, Bill, I'm busier now than I've ever been. I got my own band. We travel all over the country. Just finished a tour from in Norway. But mostly what I do, I work with this company called Jamboree, and it's a kitchen. They build countertops and build tops for bars and kitchen cabinets and things. It's a big organization up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The fellow that owns it he was a good friend, and he was he really liked Johnny Cash and Johnny Cash Band, and I met him a few years ago, and I worked with them. He'll have dealers all over the country, and we'll have dealer events we go to, and I'll sometimes take the band and play, and sometimes go by myself, and just like me and you've been doing, just tell the stories about what happened, and we'll go to we try to book them where there's a $1 Million Quartet show going on,
sure,
and he'll invite a group of his dealers and people, and we'll go to the show, and that's what I do. I just got a thing just a little while ago, like first of the month, the 6th to the 9th, I'll be in Peoria, Illinois. Then the 25th through 28th, be in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Then in February, 8th through 21 in Omaha, and then Cedar Falls. Just what I'm interested in doing, just keep going as long as I can and have a big time.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this for Elvis Online, but I don't want you to hang up. But if you'd like to say goodbye to everybody.
I will. Hey, I really enjoyed you let me be on the show, and sometime maybe we can be so we can do it in person. Keep this show going, and it has been an honor for me to tell you what little I know about what happened back then. And next year, tell you something funny that's happened. Next year, which is just a few weeks from now, I'll be celebrating my 60th birthday.
And my anniversary.
And my anniversary, that's right. Joyce just walked in. She's been shopping. I don't know if she got me a present or not, but anyway.
Not your birthday.
And so I just want to, I tell people I want to go on my 100th birthday. I'm going to have a big party. And I'm going to invite all my friends, and I'm going to do something spectacular, something I've never done before. And they said, man, what could it be? I said, I'm going to take a drink of whiskey and smoke a cigarette. And that'll be something I've never done before. But hey, I've had a great time, and anytime you need to talk about something, hang on a minute.
Clarify your 60th anniversary in music. You kept saying birthday and anniversary.
I said something on the drum too, baby. 60th anniversary. Let me start over there. You can redo this. Can you do it?
Yes.
Next year.
Okay.
I'm celebrating my 60th anniversary, sitting on a drum stool.
There you go. And
Joyce and me will be celebrating our 54th anniversary. We've been married. And you see the reason that's happened. You see how she kept me straight right there?
Hey, I'm married. I understand.
When I messed up, and she made me do it over.
There you go. Well, thank you very much, Fluke.
Hey, enjoyed it. Thank you.